Everyone, thanks for coming to LawyerVid channel. Your support is very much appreciated. If you're an attorney, go to lawyervid.com, sign up, create a profile, and make yourself available for online video consultations. And if you're looking for an attorney, go to lawyervid.com, find an attorney of your choosing, and schedule an online video consultation directly through the platform. So in today's video, I wanted to give a general overview of what it was like practicing in criminal defense, and I wanted to discuss the first jury trial that I ever handled. So when I was in law school, I wanted to be involved in criminal work. And I think that there is sort of like, I think a lot of law students or like early practitioners, they sort of have that idea in their head that they want to be involved in the law practice, to be involved in like criminal cases. They want to either be on the defense or they want to be like the prosecutor, and they have a very, very like, they want to litigate. And I think that that's what a big part of my drive was when I was in law school. It was a lot of that, like, that idea of getting in court. I just remember I really, really liked to go to court. So it was a lot of fun for me to like get in there and put on the show and do the whole like, Atticus Finch type thing, To Kill a Mockingbird or whatever type of like, whatever movie or whatever it was. I just wanted to sort of like perform in that role. There was something like appealing about doing that as a young attorney. But I do think that when you do this long enough, it's almost akin to, I think, the same type of symptoms that a police officer might get. Somebody who's exposed to this type of like violence and this type of like brutality and just disgusting human behavior on a daily basis. And it's just a little bit different though when you're on the defense side of it. Because when you're on the prosecution side of it, you could at least like look at yourself and say, okay, well, you're going against certain actions. Whereas when you're on the defense side of it, you're actually standing up on behalf of somebody who's been accused of, disgusting things a lot of times. Just call it what it is. So I think that there is like a general symptoms and things that happen to a defense attorney over time that they're very like often not talked about, because like the reality of it is that if you're practicing criminal defense, you have to be like ruthless. You can't have those types of emotions. Like if you could beat a case based on a technicality, or you're able to use a small detail or fact to your advantage, you're going to try to do everything you can to obviously win the case for your client. You're not going to, you have to have that mentality where you're basically ruthless. And as a young criminal defense attorney, that was what I was. I was absolutely ruthless. I did not care if they did it. I did not care about any of that. I went in there to win the case. It was a competition. It was what I was paid to do, and I was going to do anything I could to do that. So over time, I believe that what happens is when you're exposed to this stuff on a daily basis and you continue to be exposed to it, I do think that you sort of develop similar symptoms that, like I said, a police officer might develop, sort of a PTSD sort of symptoms where you start making light of heinous situations. You start trying to find humor in things that are not generally funny. There's also some other things I noticed. Like you might go into this like, and you might be like really like into true crime. So you might be like always wanting to watch like Dateline, and you might be wanting to watch like, all these television programs. But it does get to the point where when you're practicing criminal defense long enough, you completely stop watching those programs. You don't want to anymore. It gets to the point where you're basically living an episode of that, to where it would be like as if you're a doctor and you're always watching like General Hospital or General ER or General Hospital or House. You're just, you're living that life. You don't need to watch it on TV to get your dose of the entertainment that true crime might bring when you're practicing criminal defense. So I think that criminal defense attorneys, I think that a lot of us do get these symptoms of like PTSD, and I think that a lot of us don't handle them the best way. And I think that a lot of attorneys, there's a big difference between when you're practicing criminal work compared to when you're practicing civil. Okay, first, I mean, obviously, the nature of what you're dealing with in a criminal case compared to a civil case is often very different. You're talking about, you have victims, you have people that are getting killed, people being assaulted, compared to monetary disputes about money and things like that really don't have such a huge impact on somebody's life. Whereas with a criminal case, you get in there into a trial and you're doing a case, I mean, this person that you're representing, their liberty is in your, I mean, it's not in your hands. We don't have that much, you don't have that much control. But the consequences of what can happen to that individual in a criminal case are so significantly grave compared to a civil case. So I think that there is a level of PTSD that criminal defense practitioners get when they do this type of law for long enough. And I remember, so the first office that I got into, the main partner attorney was like more or less like a mentor. He would probably deny that this type of practice had this type of effect, because nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to say, oh yeah, this actually does affect how you interact and how you feel. Nobody wants to admit to that. But I remember that this particular attorney, whenever there were the really ugly cases, he wouldn't take them. He would have me do the consultation. Sometimes I would take the case. And one case in particular is my first jury trial. And, these are things that you talk about at risk of, I risk people losing respect. I risk people wondering, how could I possibly be involved in this? How could I possibly represent an individual accused of such crime? So my first jury trial was actually an assault case. And so the facts that were presented was that my client, he was working at a club, and he went out to the car with the girl, and he assaulted her in the car. Now, what I can say to preface a story is that I put the case on in front of a jury, and the jury came back in 45 minutes, not guilty. They acquitted my client. Now, there was a very, very pivotal moment in my law practice because, one, I actually didn't believe that my client was involved. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. The girl did a whole bunch of stuff in this case that was very, very suspect. Like, for instance, she was texting him, telling him to go out to the car, but then she deleted those texts. And, she had a relationship with another guy that was at the club that night. It just, there was a lot of fishy things going on her end. Plus they did the assault kit. There was no evidence of contusions of force or anything like that. The reality of it is that she had regret, is what the theory was in the case. She had been wanting a relationship with this individual. She had told him to go out to the car. They did their thing. And then what ended up happening was she was regretful because immediately after they did their thing, he got a phone call from his baby mother. And she immediately got like jealous, and then she regretted it, and she sort of like, she took the story and she told the story to the point where she couldn't get out of it. That's essentially what the theory of the case was. And obviously the jury believed it. But, you know, like I say, when I say that you have to be ruthless in criminal defense, it's kind of one of these things where I remember, so she had to take the stand. And so she's on cross-examination, and, you know, I'm like grilling her about the fact that she deleted these text messages, the fact that she told him to go out to the car, the fact that she did not actually make a choice to go to the police, that it was a friend of hers that actually stopped a police officer, and then she started to, you know, tell the story. And I remember, you know, there was one point where she was very emotional on the stand, and I'm like grilling her, and I remember she's like getting emotional to the point of tears. But like myself, being a criminal defense attorney at the time, that's like, I'm feeling like I'm winning, because she's getting overly emotional and she's being very reactive when I'm asking her these questions, and I'm leading her into different like traps in questioning. And then in my closing argument, you know, sure enough, my argument to the jury was that she only got emotional when I was asking the tough questions. So, like I said, you have to be ruthless if you want to be good at practicing criminal defense. And you also have to be very, very shrewd and very, very keen, because there's a couple things about this case that were unknown to the jury that could have changed the entire background, the outcome. My client, he had been previously convicted of a crime for a residential burglary. Now, why that matters and what's very important about that fact is, if I keep him off the stand, that evidence will never come in. The fact that he's a prior felon and that he was previously convicted of a residential burglary. But if I put him on the stand, then the state will be allowed to impeach him on the fact that he had a prior felony for residential burglary, and that can make the entire case go down the tubes. Because then, all of a sudden, you're going to get a jury thinking that your client is an opportunist. So I kept him off the stand, and I simply made the argument that she lied rather than presenting a defense. And it was the right thing to do, because I'm firmly convinced that if he took the stand and if the state were allowed to bring out that impeachment evidence that he had previously been convicted of a residential burglary, I think he would have been convicted. That's why I say you have to be ruthless as a criminal defense attorney if you want to be effective. At the same time, this type of work can create sort of an internal cognitive dissonance between what you're doing, who you're defending, what they did, and what you're doing to defend them. You're doing everything within the confines of the law. Absolutely nothing I did was unethical. Everything I did was actually what I was supposed to do. It was being the smartest attorney you could possibly be. I did believe that client. I do think that the girl was lying. I think that the story was extremely embellished. And the reality of it, though, is that who really knows, right? It's impossible to really say if you're not her or you're not him. That's why there's no such thing as finding somebody innocent. It's just not guilty, not enough proof. So Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this story. And please continue to visit the channel. And please visit lawyervid.com. Your support is very much appreciated. And I thank you very much.